Welcome, everybody, and thank you for joining us. Over 70 million people are currently forcibly displaced worldwide, and that number, according to the Refugee Investment Network, is projected to grow to over 300 million by the year 2030. Today's community forum is dedicated to Refugee Lens Investing in honor of World Refugee Awareness Month. You will hear from a great panel of speakers that will help us learn about the opportunity to invest in and with forcibly displaced people. This forum is part of an ongoing series of webinars that focus on a specific topic for CIIC community members to engage in open dialogue, share resources, and identify opportunities for mutual learning and collaboration. My name is Victoria Carrion, and I serve as Director of Membership and Partnerships at the Catholic Impact Investing Collaborative, or CIIC. CIIC is a community of Catholic investors and partners that promote impact investing as a way to steward financial resources in service to people and planet. Before we start our program today, I'd like to ask you to join me in a moment of grace. God of our wandering ancestors, long have we known that your heart is with the refugee, that you were born into time in a family of refugees fleeing violence in their homeland, who then gathered up their hungry child and fled into alien country. Their cry, your cry, resounds through the ages. Will you let me in? Give us hearts that break open when our brothers and sisters turn to us with that same cry. Then surely all these things will follow. Ears will no longer turn deaf to their voices. Eyes will see a moment of grace instead of a threat. Tongues will not be silenced, but will instead advocate, and hands will reach out, working for peace in their homeland, working for justice in the lands where they seek safe haven. Lord, protect all refugees in their travels. May they find a friend in me, and so make me worthy of the refuge I have found in you. Amen. This beautiful prayer is by our friends at Catholic Relief Services. We want to hear from you and let you know that you can connect with us, with our speakers, and with each other through the chat box. If you have questions or comments for our speakers, please drop them in the Q&A box, and be sure to upvote those questions that you'd like to see answered by clicking on the thumbs up icon. This webinar is being recorded, and you will receive a link of the recording in a few days, along with a summary of the resources and takeaways from today's event. I will now turn it over to Jessica Cook, who will be moderating today's conversation. Jessica is Managing Director of Business Development at Ascension Investment Management and co-chairs CIIC's Participation and Outreach Committee, in addition to serving on CIIC's Advisory Board. Welcome, Jessica. Over to you.
Thank you, Victoria, and welcome, everyone. We are so pleased to host this next forum and pay respect to Refugee Awareness Month. Organized by the United Nations, World Refugee Day falls each year on June 20th and is dedicated to refugees around the globe. It's a day that we honor the courage, the strength, and determination of men, women, and children who are forced to flee their homeland under threat of persecution, conflict, and violence. The 2021 World Refugee Day theme is Together We Heal, Learn, and Shine. Access to healthcare and medical support saves lives, period. It is critical that people who are forced to flee their homes receive the care that they need. Education helps people forced to flee build better lives. Refugee children need access to quality education so they can pursue better lives and help themselves and their families. Sport can enrich the lives of people forced to leave their homes. It can boost mental health. It can help refugees gain confidence, forge new friendships, and feel welcome. In the work to protect refugees, sport can be used to create safe and protective environments where everyone can discover their full potential. I really believe this World Refugee Day theme ties so nicely with the focus of our forum today, because the reality is that many of us just don't understand or appreciate the breadth of the global crisis and how many people around the world are displaced, even within their own communities. Now, from an impact investor perspective, investment commitments can dramatically improve outcomes for displaced people, including healing and growing and thriving. They have the potential to offer access to affordable housing, quality housing, financial services, banking, healthcare, childcare, you name it. Investments can be made in startups, established companies. They can be made in social impact initiatives and businesses that are owned and run by migrants and refugees themselves. Everyone should have the right to live with dignity and security. And I'm so glad that CIIC is putting a spotlight on this important topic. We're honored to have 3 distinguished speakers define refugee investing and finance from different investment viewpoints. Tim Docking is the Managing Director of the Refugee Investment Network. He's going to prime our conversation and introduce the topic of Refugee Lens Investing. Now, this is a framework to help define, qualify, source, and measure the impact of refugee investments. The Refugee Lens was developed by RIN in collaboration with its partners and in response to the question posed by the interested capital community, how can we invest in refugees? Yankee Sharing, the executive director at Accompany Capital, will be speaking on her company's efforts to create pathways to self-sufficiency for immigrant and refugee entrepreneurs in New York City by providing access to affordable credit, empowering with financial education, and offering training and best practices in technology. Finally, Jay Dunn, Executive Director at DF Impact Capital, the Dunn Family Charitable Foundation, will complete our formal presentations and speak on the approach and strategy that his family's foundation has taken to invest to promote positive change within refugee communities. We're going to conclude the forum by inviting participants to ask questions and engage with our speakers. So please don't hesitate. Please share your voice, share your questions, share your thoughts. The forum topic was actually introduced by CIIC's program manager, Maggie, and I couldn't be more grateful because it's really made me appreciate all that I don't know on the subject. And I'm just really pleased that we can highlight practitioners that raise awareness and can encourage investors to just take action. So I'm going to introduce our first speaker, Tim Docking. Tim is the Managing Director of the Refugee Investment Network. It's the first impact investing collaborative dedicated to creating durable solutions to global forced migration. Prior to RIN, Tim was an international business executive at IBM, and prior to that, he worked in and out of the US government, focusing on Africa and international development. So please join me in welcoming Tim.
Thank you, Jessica, and thank you, Victoria, for that lovely prayer to get us going today. It's really an honor to address CIIC today and a privilege to talk about the work we're doing at the Refugee Investment Network. I'd like to share my screen here and present a few slides to you today, acknowledging full well, as one living here in Washington, DC, that we know that power corrupts, but PowerPoint can corrupt absolutely. And so I will try to do this in a way that doesn't overwhelm anyone here, but really sets out in about a 10-slide deck to begin to explain why refugee investing is so important, and then to answer that question that we are so often asked as an investment intermediary, which is, what is refugee investing and how can you do it? So let me begin with a simple definition here, if everyone can see the screen. When we talk about refugees, a lot of people ask us, who is a refugee? What is a refugee? RIN defines refugees quite broadly, inclusive of those who have been forcibly displaced across international borders, the most common use of the term refugee, to include internally displaced people, very much growing that number of people, those displaced by violence, climate change, natural disaster, and this is very important, the communities they live in. So this really creates quite a broad pool of people who are often referred to as people of concern. Well, we can see, and as it was, I think, rightly pointed out at the outset of this call, this is a social crisis and the defining one of our time, we believe. Currently, that number of people I've just described hovers around 80 million people, very much increased by the inclusion of host community members as well, who often live at the same level of the migrants that live there. This number, however, is projected to grow rapidly over the next decade, up to around 300 million people. The other point I would just point out on this chart is that the average duration of people in protracted refugee situations, those situations in which people have been out of their country or displaced for over 5 years, is 17 years. The point being that these people often are not going home. But refugees are often overlooked, and they present really untapped potential, we believe. In this slide, I think just quickly, is important to present to begin with to a group of investors like yourselves. Refugees are entrepreneurial, founding some of those companies, all of those companies pointed out on the right-hand side there. They're hardworking. They've shown to be loyal employees, often, staying with their jobs longer than the average employee will. And also, they've shown to yield economic benefits after about 5 years in country. And finally, I would say that data show as well that refugees are credit worthy. This data here presented by Kiva. We also have a partner at the IRC Center for Economic Opportunity that has found that refugees, new Americans in the United States, repay their auto loans 10 points higher than the average American. So those are some of the economic justifications for including this population in are the lens that we'll talk about briefly. But there's the bigger issues as well. I imagine that many of you are familiar with the Sustainable Development Goals, those 17 goals that present the challenge currently that the international development community is trying to address that will lead to further development in emerging market countries. The RIN, as we call ourselves, the Refugee Investment Network, has mapped the impact of refugee investing to 13 of those 17 goals. In short, making the point that investing in refugees is really critical to the achievement of the SDGs. So what we're talking about here is really building out prosperity instead of barriers. These are just a few points here that we like to show groups as well that I think are important to take in. 80% of the world's refugee population is hosted in low or middle income countries. COVID-19 has really exacerbated already high unemployment and slow economic growth, social fracturing in developed countries as well. And if you have followed the news in some of these highly impacted refugee countries, it's created streams of nationalism, xenophobia, and fragility. So these points and these conditions are really often exacerbated when people are locked into their refugee status and unable to fully engage and integrate socially and economically. So the theme of this slide is really that vicious cycles can be created by holding people who have been displaced out of economic growth scenarios and socially set aside. So it's within this context that my business partner, John Kluge, and I set up the Refugee Investment Network. We launched this initiative on World Refugee Day 2 years ago, and it was really set up to become the first impact investing collaborative dedicated to creating long-term solutions to global forced migration. The RIN, I think, is best understood with just a quick review of our 4 pillars, our theory of change, which just real quickly can be shorthanded into the initiatives that help to mobilize capital, to build out the field of refugee investing, to change that negative stereotype or narrative that surrounds the displaced person, that portrays them as someone that's a burden on society, and to help change policy environments that hold refugees down. Those are the 4 pillars that all of our initiatives are built upon. But as I said at the outset, the question really for you all probably are wondering is, what is refugee investing and how does one do it? Indeed, many of the investors that we speak with ask us this. And so what RIN set out to do at the beginning, and what Jessica referred to, is this lens. As this slide shows, we really consulted at the outset of the creation of the RIN, other investors, humanitarian organizations, refugees themselves. And we talked specifically with people from the gender lens community that helped to build that lens. And they gave us very good guidance, I think, which led to this really simple, I like to think, elegant taxonomy that has 6 parts to it. And I'll just quickly go through this, and then the rest of the slides will refer back to this briefly. In the first instance, we see refugee investing as probably you all think about it when you hear the term refugee investments. And that would be an R1 sort of investment. That is a refugee founder or entrepreneur. But the refugee lens is much, much bigger than that R1 sort of refugee investment. Indeed, it includes companies and organizations that are refugee-led as defined there. But where we really see with our research and through our market assessments, a growing number of refugee lens investment opportunity is in the R3 and the R4 categories: refugee supporting investments and refugee host weighted investments as well. Lending facilities and refugee funds, as we've defined here, also make up this important lens. If you want further details on this, the URL is listed at the bottom of this page, but that's just very high level and I think important to go over real briefly at the outset of these slides here. And let's just talk about one case study, just to give you a more concrete example. Launch Capital Partners is an impact investing private equity group based in Louisville, Kentucky, that operates multifamily housing solutions for those affected by forced migration. In other words, new Americans that come into this country. Using our lens, Launch Capital Partners is an R6 in the first instance, refugee lens investment. It is a refugee fund. It's targeting refugee investments. And the property management company, which is also within Launch Capital Partners, represents a really good example of an R3 investment type as well. A refugee supporting company that provides goods and services to support humanitarian efforts. Just to give you an idea of how we use the lens and how some of our partners. Launch happens to be one that we work with to do some advisory service work with, but I wanted to use that as a case study. We could talk about many more. I just have a couple of slides left here that I want to share. Just again, speaking with an expert group of investors, and some of whom are new to the idea of impact investing. I just wanted to talk about how refugee lens investing can be used to work across the full capital continuum. And what this slide really, I think, portrays and I think helps visualize is that what we're finding, if you follow the columns, the vertical columns down, and what we're finding is that as we get out into the field and do our analysis, we're finding interest within each one of these, not just those impact columns in the internal, the middle part of this table, but we're finding companies that are unwittingly engaged in practices. Perhaps they're working in a region or with a population that's been heavily affected by forcible displacement, that are very happy to learn, even if they're on the financial only column here, about our lens, because on the one hand, it feels good to be having impact. And the other, it's very good for their sustainability work and to perhaps draw ESG investors. I won't go through each one of these columns here, but clearly where we're most focused is in this impact space here, and working in each one of these areas. This is really my last slide that I wanted to talk about, just to give people a sense that this isn't all theory. This isn't something that just a small group of us are working on. And just to provide some examples here of interested Refugee Lens investors that are seeking deals. Indeed, the reason that RIN has stepped in a very demand-driven way, and to illustrate that our work has really identified hundreds of investors, faith-based investors to be sure, but investors from across that capital continuum there, from across the foundation world that's seeking no returns, perhaps giving grants, et cetera, to those that are seeking just concessional funds, all the way up to those seeking commercial funds, have interest in this topic. The question that they had really was, how? How do we do this? So we see here that some examples of partners we've identified. There are many more that we could list there. You see Launch listed there, and I want to point out the Dunn Family Charitable Foundation as well, and Jay will speak to you just in a minute. On the other side here, the Refugee Investments and Blended Finance side of this slide here, and technical assistance partners, I think it's just important to highlight that our 1 and our 2 investments in opportunities are growing as incubators and accelerators really spread, I think, in refugee communities globally. Our research and market assessments are showing, as I mentioned earlier, a high number of R3 and 4 enterprises that are investment ready, and identifying funds and encouraging funds, those R5 and R6 debt and equity funds that we've specifically identified in areas of research: Mexico, Colombia, Uganda, Jordan, and the United States. And as the Refugee Lens gains traction, we're seeing more international organizations, domestic organizations, some of those listed below, also becoming quite interested. We're currently employed by 2 large bilateral organizations that are conducting research in these areas. So let me stop there. I think I've spoken for too long, but hopefully I've given you a flavor to begin this conversation, Jessica, and for the others to speak around.
Thank you so much, Tim. In fact, that's what I was about to say. I was going to say you've built a wonderful foundation for us to start this conversation on. I'm really glad that you're participating. Thank you so much. I'm going to introduce our next speaker, Yankee Sharing. Yankee is the executive director of Accompany Capital. Yankee's passion for economic development comes from her belief that with the appropriate support, immigrants and refugees can thrive and contribute in significant ways to the economy of their new homes. She embodies the story herself, having lived in Tibetan refugee communities in India and Nepal before immigrating to the United States, getting a master's from Columbia, and founding Accompany Capital in 1997. So please join me in welcoming Yankee.
Thank you. So I hope everyone can see my screen. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, great. So good morning, everyone. And thank you to the Catholic Impact Investing Cooperative for inviting Accompany Capital to share with you the impact of our services to refugees, and special thanks to Maggie Stoller for organizing this important discussion. And of course to Victoria Carrion and Jessica Cook for that really wonderful introduction, which laid the stage for refugee investing. So what I'm going to do is, I'm going to tell you a little bit about Accompany Capital through the stories of our clients. So as you heard from, I think it was either Jessica, was it Jessica who mentioned, Accompany Capital's mission is to create a pathway to self-sufficiency. And the way we do this is we do it with access to credit, loans which range from 500 to 250,000. And when I run into someone and they just have a few minutes and they ask us what we do, I tell them about the range of our clients. I say, well, we have a client who comes in once a year before Valentine's Day to borrow $500 so he can sell roses on Valentine's Day. And then on the other extreme, we have a client who owns 5 grocery stores and has created over 55 jobs. So we also provide a lot of financial education and training in best business practices and technology, which we've come to realize, especially during this pandemic, how critical it is for businesses to be able to use technology to provide their products and services.
Yankee, can I pause you quickly and just,
Sure.
do you want to, at the very top of your screen, hit from beginning and make the slides a little bigger for everyone?
Make it bigger?
Yeah, just hit from beginning at the left-hand side.
Okay, let me see.
Yes, and then,
Larger?
no, that's perfect. And then just go ahead and start with your next slide.
Okay, thank you. So a little bit about a company capital as you look at this picture of one of our clients. So what I decided to do was tell the trajectory of the development of our products and services through the stories of our clients. So a company capital is one of several hundred CDFIs in the US. But what is unique about us is that we were established in response to the needs of refugees. It normally, I know IRC is similar in terms of mission with us, but normally most CDFIs, they progress the other way, providing services to all entrepreneurs, and then some of them may apply to have a program specifically for refugees. So as time went on, we started by serving clients like Yelena, who's started a childcare center. The first initial group of refugees we worked with were from the former Soviet Union. And over time, Yelena received 7 loans for a total of 155,000. And as time went on, she built her credit score and she was actually able to buy the building where her daycare center, one of her childcare centers was, and expanded to a second location. And she also created 35 full-time jobs for people in her community. So this business is located on Staten Island. So what's interesting about that period in our development was I know today's topic is about impact investing, and many of you are eager to see how you can support the work of RIN and other organizations similar to a company capital. And I did, when I checked the attendee list, I see there are a few programs, one from St. Louis. I know there are several people from IRC here at this event. So initially we were very dependent on working with the Small Business Administration. We are certified as a SBA microlender. We were also certified as a community advantage lender, which meant, and this was a few years ago, which meant that we could make loans up to 250,000. And that was a big step for us. The only challenge with that was we had to actually raise the funds to make the larger loans, any loan that was above 50,000. So that's when we started to seriously look at investors for our loan fund. And we were ERIS rated. Let me just check my notes here to make sure I'm giving you all the points that I wanted to share with you. So we ERIS rated, and then during the pandemic, the challenge was, how do you raise capital for new products like the PPP loans? So I know among us here today, we have representatives from the Missionary Sisters of the Sacred Heart. So we've gone on to get investments from investors like them, and that was actually extremely useful for when we had to really pivot during the pandemic. And we've made over 6 million in PPP loans. So that investment was very important. We also got a 2 million investment from Google's Grow with Small Business program. We are a member of Opportunity Finance Network, and they very kindly extended a emergency loan of $1 million. So the next group of clients were very similar to Ismaila and Mohammed Ba, and I hope all of you can see my screen, still see my screen. I hope I haven't pressed anything, so you're not seeing it. So Maggie, alert
Yes,
me.
it looks good.
Right. Yes. So Ismaila and Mohammed, they're from Guinea, and they opened a small corner grocery store in the South Bronx. And we love this business because it was providing fresh food, created the 2 full-time jobs. They also had a part-time helper, and this was in a food desert. So we were able to help them. Clients like Ismaila and Mohammed, when they initially came to us, they had very little equity. We were very fortunate because we have a savings match program, an IDA program. I know IRC also had a similar program. It was funded by Office of Refugee Resettlement. So for each dollar they saved, we were able to match it with $1. The match was provided by ORR. So with the match of 4,000, the savings of 4,000, and a loan of 30,000, they kept, growing this business. So what's unusual about Ismaila and Mohammed, instead of carrying on with the business, they actually decided to sell the business, and they said they felt they had enough confidence and experience and able to speak English adequately, so they would actually be able to apply for a 9-to-5 job, and they felt, they had had enough with entrepreneurship. So we also, do consider that a success. And then more recent, we have clients like Syed Mohammed. He's refugee from Egypt. He came here in 2014, very entrepreneurial. When he came to us, he was renting 3 food carts because from one he was selling lunch, the other one he was selling juice and smoothies, and then he had a breakfast cart. And he, and obviously we felt he could sort of move and save and plan and work more efficiently if he could work from just one food truck. So they attended our savings program. They received, because they're a family, they received 4,000 in match. They had 4,000 in savings. We were able to extend them a loan of 10,000, which is what he needed. He had some savings, and then he was able to buy the food truck, which saved him rental fees. And the other thing I want very important to point out is, when the clients are repaying a loan, they're building their credit, and having a good credit score, as all of you in the audience, I'm sure know, is really critical here in the US. We work very closely with Credit Builders Alliance in Washington, and what their research has proved is with a good credit score, someone of a low to middle income household can actually save 250,000 in fees and interest if you have a good credit score. So that's one of the critical things we able to convey to our clients, and we help them along the way by helping them annually check their credit score and see what can be done to improve it. So then the last slide I have is of Luz. She's one of our recent clients, and Maggie will be showing you a video where you get to hear from her and see her business, visit her business. She's from Colombia. She had many years of experience working as a seamstress, and she was able to produce patterns and actually extremely experienced. So we were able to extend her a 3,000 loan, along with a second loan of 10,000, which helped with cash flow and equipment. And she also participated in our IDA program. So I'm going to, Yes, stop there. But before I have Maggie show you the video of our savings program, you know, of the 37 million that Company Capital has lent in over 4,000 loans, 6 million has been to refugees, and that has created 1,088 jobs. As we've seen from these stories, access to capital has not only provided the capital that these individuals needed for their business, but helped them build their credit, save in interest and fees. And I think what Jessica mentioned earlier during the introduction, part of our mission and part of the impact is, being able to support individuals and families and refugees to live with dignity and security, and support them. They're doing the hard work, but we're here to support them to become productive members of our community, which also benefits all of us. So I'm going to wait for the question and answer section, but I'm going to hand it over to Maggie now so she can share video of our IDA program. Through the savings program, 1,700 refugees have invested 24 million in further education, recertification, micro business, and we actually had 95 of them purchase their first home. So thank you. So Maggie, over to you.
Yankee, Maggie and I were talking offline.
Yeah.
We're running a bit late, so we might be able to share the video during Q&A, or if we can't get to it, we're going to make sure all the participants have it in the learning report.
Definitely.
Is that okay?
Sure.
Okay, but Yankee, I just want to thank you so much, for the work you're doing, what all the good the Company Capital is doing for those refugees, and just adding those personal stories that you did in the loans. It really makes it more real to me, hopefully to the participants in the audience, and really encourages us to take action and do more. And with that, I'm going to remind everyone, please don't be shy to ask a question and engage with our speakers. There's so much wisdom to share. I'm going to introduce Jay Dunn. Jay is our third speaker. He's going to wrap us up before Q&A. He's the executive director of the Dunn Family Charitable Foundation, a private foundation based in Massachusetts, focused on poverty alleviation and social justice globally. And also managing director of DF Impact Capital, which is a family office vehicle for making high impact investments. Jay also has over 30 years of experience in international investments and project development with a focus on Latin America. So please join me in welcoming Jay.
Thank you very much. So I'm not going to use any slides. I'm sorry, I'll just look at my background here, but I just want to talk kind of more informally. I think since this is a forum on impact investing, if it's okay, I'll talk just a little bit about our approach to refugee investing within the context of our impact investing, and really more just talk a little bit about our approach and our journey to impact investing and how we've been able to then really try to focus within the investing in and supporting displaced people. So there's nothing especially unique about this. I think it's what many of the other of you who are listening in are either doing or thinking about doing. Nothing proprietary, but maybe just some ideas that will resonate with you or trigger some new ideas or just confirm what you're thinking. As a foundation, for ever since we were formed over 25 years ago, we've done impact investing where it was very ad hoc and I would say not strategic. We would make loans to some of our grant recipients just to support them. But we've tried to become more strategic and purposeful and intentive in the last 5 years. And so first we started by, as I'm sure many else have, we implemented and adopted and implemented a socially responsible investment strategy across all of our investments, all of our assets, both foundation and the entire family office. And while that's impactful, the term I use, not a technical term, I kind of say impact with a small I. It was positive screens and some negative screen investing, thematic investing, specific areas of interest. But we really wanted to be more impactful or with a capital I, high impact investing. So we've, as a family, allocated both from our foundation's endowment and from the rest of the family, specific capital for higher impact investing. And, but which is all mission aligned. It was really a way to try to focus our investing on things that match the mission of our foundation and our values. So the approach for that impact investing, however, has been more of a high impact or impact driven capital preservation strategy. And the way we've tried to go about that is through diversification. We are building and have built a broad portfolio, a number of investments, all mission aligned, but that's how we hope to preserve capital, but allow us to support a lot of different organizations and strategies that are mission aligned. We prefer, we're small, two people, myself and another, can't do extensive due diligence. So we tend to work through intermediaries, funds and loan pools and things like that, and rely on other people who are experts. So it's just a statement that you can do it if you're small. You can find others who can do it or make smaller investments in funds. We diversify through debt and equity investments. We diversify domestic investments and international. We do blended finance where we're using our grants to support some of the groups we invest in. And lastly, we try to be catalytic wherever possible. We can't make huge investments as a small family office and a small foundation. So we try to provide early capital, or we'll try to support, proof of concept, something that hasn't been done before, support a new management team that doesn't have a track record. Again, these are all just things that hopefully resonate with others that are listening. And we try to be creative, we try to be flexible. And that's flexible in structuring, don't need big long loan documents. And finally, we try to collaborate. We're trying to learn from others and get help from others. So that's a little bit of background on our impact investing. And so how has that specifically played out as we've adopted a strategy of trying to invest in refugees, or we've learned and decided to kind of use a broader definition of displaced people. I guess so along the lines of learning from others and collaborating, we participate in a donor group out of Massachusetts called the New England International Donors Group, and we were part of a giving circle on refugees and displaced people, and we had the good fortune of meeting the Refugee Investment Network and Tim and his colleague John. And that really helped us start to think about how to think about that refugee lens that Tim described. And that's what we've adopted. It's allowed us to be think a little more broadly about the definitions. We are looking to support refugees, asylum seekers, displaced people, migrants in vulnerable conditions. And so that was our first example of collaboration. And learning from others. The RIN introduced us to we've made 3 investments in the refugee space. So the first one, we were introduced to the International Rescue Committee's Center for Economic Opportunity. And they were putting together a loan fund to support loans to refugees and immigrants. And we just absolutely love the strategy of building credit, providing credit, microloans. So that was our first loan in this space. But through that, we had another opportunity to collaborate. We met other investors in that program. And I want to, of course, as always, give a shout out to the Sisters of Mercy and their impact investing arm, Cabrini Impact, and Keoka Lions, who, in talking about that investment, we started saying, what else are you doing in this space? And learned about other opportunities, and Cabrini Impact and others are very open about kind of sharing due diligence, sharing the work they've done, and that helped us look at other opportunities. I'll mention Jessica's organization, Ascension. We've talked with them and try to learn about what they're doing, others that are on this call. So that, direct directly and indirectly led to a second investment. We've invested in the Kiva Refugee Investment Fund. I think Will and Lev are on listening in on this call, which is so the IRC fund is domestic and debt. The Kiva Refugee Fund is equity-like, but it's international, where they're doing providing loans to microcredit organizations working in refugee communities internationally. And then Cabrini Impact also introduced us to our third investment, which is an example of trying to be creative and early, where, and I think I also saw mission-driven finances on this call. So we invested in a fund called the Freedom 100 Fund, which finances bonds for detainees that have been detained in ICE prisons, where they need a bond to get out. And so by financing that bond, it's an effort to support migrants, but also to really prove or restructure the immigration system. So all very different kinds of investments and different sides of looking at displaced people and how to support them. We're looking at other fund opportunities, other loan opportunities. I guess the last point I would make about us trying to be flexible, maybe just broadening the consideration, is our foundation and our impact investing strategy is very focused also on investing in or addressing root causes of forced migration. So that's probably not exactly technically refugee investing, but as was mentioned earlier, there are refugees from violence, from persecution, and certainly from climate change. That was in Tim's definition. And so things we can do to try to create resiliency, create jobs, create a reason not to become a refugee or a migrant, or create the ability to stay and not be on the move or be displaced, is something that we've done 8 to 10 investments in that area as well. So we see them as linked. So that's been part of our refugee lens approach to investing. And there's been a lot of collaboration and learning from others in that space. So I think that's just some of the background and the way we've tried to take a broad impact investing strategy and apply it to supporting displaced people. So I'll stop there.
Thank you so much, Jay. And with the little amount of time we have left, I would really like to just, I'm going to take one question and have all of you answer it. But first, I want to thank you all. I want to thank you all for participating. I mean, I'm inspired and respect all the work you're doing. You are bold innovators, and what my call to the audience is a call to action and to follow in your footsteps. But I think some of us, with this topic being broad and maybe even a little bit, how do I start? I would love to hear from each of you to say, what are the resources out there outside of course, the three of you and hopefully CIIC, that they can educate themselves to move forward. And not only that, but what would you recommend some first steps to be? How do we make that call to action to go from I'm learning to I'm doing? Because that's what we need to do. We want to follow in your footsteps. And who would like to start? Because that is a broad question.
Jessica, can you quickly summarize your question? Sorry, I didn't get
Sorry.
Yeah,
Sorry. To summarize, I would think, what are some key resources that people can use to start to build a program? And then, what are first steps? I want to invest. I want to make an impact for refugees. How can I start?
Mm-hmm. So I'm sure Tim has big picture, advice. But a company capital, we're closer to the clients, we're more on the ground. So there's some really excellent options. I'm sure, for instance, C-Note, where you can have an individual, if you're not a huge organization, even for like $500 or $1,000, you can make an investment and then they reinvest the money in CDFIs. And a company capital is a CDFI. There are many CDFIs. I know IRC also has a CDFI. And so through them, you can make investments where CDFIs, especially during the pandemic, we were so active and we're, much more aware of, the need to make it easy as possible for organizations or companies or individuals to invest in the CDFI of your choice.
Perfect, thank you.
Thanks, Jessica, for that question. What I would just say real quickly as well is that we list a lot of resources on our website. We see ourselves really as an intermediary that's really first and foremost interested in being a catalyst for the dissemination of these sorts of information and the answer to your question. So I think it's also important to educate ourselves on this topic and to look at your own portfolios. Perhaps what we're finding as we do our market assessments, we have an assessment framework we call the Initiative for Inclusive Investing, where we look at a market and we look at through our lens, and we look for those barriers to social and economic integration of forcibly displaced people and form a pipeline of refugee investments that we bring to capital partners for their own evaluation, for their own due diligence. And when we do that, we've really been pleasantly surprised to find there are a lot of companies out there that are unwittingly engaged in supporting different populations in particular that love to learn about this lens approach because they want to use it. They want that stamp of good housekeeping, for ESG investors. It's good for their own employees to know that they're supporting groups that they were unaware of, and frankly it's good for going out to markets and raising ESG funds as well. So we were pleasantly surprised that there's quite a bit of this already going on, and to just look into your impact investing, thinking about refugees and thinking about this lens that we're working with.
Our resources, as I said, we've looked to Tim's organization. We, again, back on that comment about flexibility, I kind of encourage anyone who hasn't done impact investing, don't overthink it, jump in small. Kind of as Yankee said, there's a number of Calverts of the world and small investment opportunities to get started. And same on refugee. We didn't need a position paper to confirm that this was a place that needed investing, or some of the comments about what good credit quality is or things like that. We just kind of jumped in, so that might not be best for people who have to get by investment committees, but there are resources out there, but Tim can help with that.
So I definitely admire that answer as well. It's enemy is the perfect, or perfect is the enemy of good. Just move forward and do the good that we can do.
Do your first investment and then be ready for your second one, and you learn more out of each investment. So
Jessica, if I may, I just want to quickly, speak about another investor. Of course, CIIC is just so experienced, missionary Sisters of the Sacred Heart. It was wonderful working with them. But we have several investors, but one of them was the Episcopal Diocese of New York. And this was actually very new for them. So it actually took them 2 years to make up their mind. So, this discussion you're having is really important. And they won't mind me sharing this with you. So initially they were really anxious, and they have been so pleased that they've come back to us and doubled their investment. But initially they were like, we're really nervous about this. We want to do it, but we're concerned. So I think, any sort of resource this collaborative can provide others, it's going to be really helpful for CDFIs like us.
Thank you for sharing that. And I can't thank you all enough for participating. And for everyone that's in the audience listening, please reach out to us. We can connect you with all three of our speakers and other resources. The important thing is to move. Let's do this. Let's make some positive change in this world. I did see another question come in on how to access international investments, since that's where so many refugees are located. So I will make sure that gets passed on to our speakers, and we will pass that response on to you. So with that, we're running out of time, and I want to hand it back over to Victoria, who's going to conclude our remarks and do a little bit of housekeeping for us. So Victoria, thank you again, everyone, so much.
Thank you, Jessica. Before we acknowledge our speakers and collaborators, we would like to ask the audience to help us choose a topic for our September Community Forum. So Maggie is going to share a slide, and I will ask you to please follow the prompt that you see at the top of the screen where it says, go to www.menti.com. You can do that on your phone or your computer and enter the code 28136577 to take a poll. It's probably easier to click on the link that we have provided in the chat box. Again, you can click on a link that Maggie is providing in the chat box to take this poll. And as you take it, hopefully we will see the results populate live on the screen. You may select up to 3 topics out of the 4 that we provide: affordable housing, healthcare and racial justice, gender lens investing, and Native communities. Thank you so much for your feedback. We will leave this up for a couple more minutes to give you some time to vote. And it looks like Native communities is a popular topic. Anyway, we'll share the final results with you. I would really like to thank our speakers, Tim Docking with the Refugee Investment Network, Yankee Shearing with Accompany Capital, and Jay Dunn with DF Impact Capital and the Dunn Family Charitable Foundation for sharing your perspectives, for an insightful discussion today on refugee investing. We are grateful to Jessica Cook as well for facilitating today's discussion, and to Maggie Stoller for coordinating and producing this event and for bringing this topic to our community. And I would also like to thank CIIC's participation and outreach committee for your help in producing this event. We do encourage you to reach out to us and engage, sign up for our newsletter if you haven't done so already, so you can learn about this and other events. Explore the resources on our website, including the stories of Catholic impact that we share on catholicimpact.org. Consider taking the CIIC Pledge. The pledge is an effort to encourage Catholic investors to take action on climate change, on the refugee crisis, inequality, racial injustice, and so many other challenges that we're facing through solutions-based impact investing strategies that drive positive societal and environmental impact. Inquire about our membership program and learn about how you can connect and collaborate with like-minded investors and gain access to faith-consistent, Catholic-informed impact investing opportunities. Thank you so much for joining us today, for your participation. We hope to see you again next time. Be well.